Donald Trump won the election in a landslide? Democrats were involved in a massive voter fraud conspiracy? Those are just a few of the claims made by Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. But are they true? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Last week, Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, gave a press conference like I've never seen before. His team claims Donald Trump won the election in a landslide, but Democrats committed voter fraud on a massive scale to rig the election, and that's why it appears Joe Biden won.
And what emerged very quickly is this is not a singular voter fraud in one state. This pattern repeats itself in a number of states. Almost exactly the same pattern, which to any experienced investigator, prosecutor, would suggest that there was a plan from a centralized place to execute these various acts of voter fraud, specifically focused on big cities, and specifically focused on, as you would imagine, big cities controlled by Democrats, and particularly focused on big cities that have a long history of corruption.
We are going to clean this mess up now. President Trump won by a landslide. We are going to prove it, and we are going to reclaim the United States of America for the people who vote for freedom.
Now, those are some pretty big claims. It is literally a conspiracy theory that there was a conspiracy to commit voter fraud to make sure Trump lost and Biden won. Now, Giuliani's team says they have evidence that proves this happened. I'll get to some of the specifics of what was said in a moment. But first, I want to talk about how the media has covered this story. Terribly. They've done a terrible job. That seems to be something I talk a lot about on the show these days. In general, the media has been completely unwilling to look at accusations of voter fraud. They've called it a barrage of lies, baseless, with absolutely no evidence. But the problem with Giuliani? He actually has a good reputation as a lawyer. Here's CNN.
In Manhattan in the 1980s, famously went after some heavy hitters on Wall Street and took on the 5 heads of the New York crime families.
He did some serious damage to the mob. He was targeted for assassination. He had a security detail with him. He went after Wall Street titans, took them down. He was fearless.
Put your mask on.
On 9/11, Giuliani's resolve and steadiness reassured a shell-shocked city and the nation.
He was somebody who was calm under fire. He showed grace under pressure. He confronted difficult facts honestly.
Difficult facts? Like voter fraud? So are you seeing headlines like, lawyer who took on Wall Street and the mob says he's found evidence of widespread voter fraud? No, you are not. Because instead of actually dealing with what Giuliani and his team actually said at the press conference, the media are making ad hominem attacks on Giuliani. Ad hominem means directed against a person rather than against what that person says. This is a common propaganda tactic. If you can't discredit what someone says, discredit the person instead. So sure, once upon a time, Giuliani may have been a force to reckon with, but now he's a hot mess. And this from CNN.
Black liquid streamed down Giuliani's face at one point. It was an event that the Daily Beast called unhinged. The New York Times called it rambling. A Washington Post headline said it was part of Giuliani's post-election meltdown.
CNN also interviewed Giuliani's former colleagues.
It has been heart-wrenching to see him destroy his legacy.
It saddens me every time I see him because I know what a strong and confident and competent person he was.
Yes, Giuliani has completely lost it. We can't listen to a word he says anymore. And please, whatever you do, don't actually watch the press conference yourself and listen to what he says. I mean, the guy looks like the Joker, for heaven's sake. Please, just let the media tell you what happened. Like the Washington Post. Giuliani's post-election meltdown starts to become literal. For instance, did you know Giuliani referenced the movie My Cousin Vinny?
Did you all watch My Cousin Vinny?
That one short reference was a very central part of the hour-and-a-half press conference. Absolutely. And then the Washington Post goes on to say someone texted them asking, is he deteriorating in real time? So, ad hominem attacks. And then the article makes this point. If Rudy is deteriorating, then so is anyone who listens to him. Bingo. This is how ad hominem attacks work. Establish that Giuliani is crazy, and so anyone who listens to him must be crazy as well. At no point in this article does it go over the specifics of what Giuliani and his team said. Instead, it paints Giuliani as the increasingly unhinged driving force of a baseless voter fraud claim that is causing division and dissent within the GOP. Giuliani is actually lucky that he's only getting attacks on his reputation. Other Trump lawyers are getting death threats.
The only lawyer that left a case left because he was threatened. His family was threatened. His children were threatened. And so was the other lawyer. Yeah, that's true. We have a little difficulty getting lawyers because our lawyers get threatened with being killed.
So instead of personal attacks, how about we actually look at what Giuliani's team said at the press conference? I'll get to that after the break. Welcome back. So Trump's legal team is claiming there was a massive conspiracy to commit voter fraud, and that Trump was the legitimate winner of the election. What evidence do they actually have? Well, we don't really know yet. That's because they said the press conference was just an opening statement.
This is an opening statement. This is something where we have told you what the evidence will show, and we have given you a brief description. That happens in a courtroom all the time, where that's not the fact-finding process. That is just an overview. This is what you can expect to see when we get to court to actually have a full trial on the merits, to actually show this evidence in court and prove our case. This is not a Law and Order episode where everything is neatly wrapped up in 60 minutes.
I know it's not Law and Order. The makeup would be better. So the Trump team is basically saying our claim is that there was voter fraud. In court, we will present all of our evidence to prove it. But we aren't going to tell you, the media, everything right now.
Also, if we're going to present things in court, if we present it to you, judges are not going to be very happy with us.
So why have the press conference in the first place?
This is basically an opening statement so the American people can understand what the networks have been hiding and what they refuse to cover, because all of your fake news headlines are dancing around the merits of this case and are trying to delegitimize what we are doing here.
So basically, they weren't attempting to provide all the evidence at the press conference last week. They will present the evidence in court, and the court will evaluate it. Not the press, not even me. So it becomes hard to fact-check the press conference. Sure hasn't stopped the media from trying, though. But Chris, you say, hasn't Trump lost a string of lawsuits because there was no evidence? Technically true, but misleading. Giuliani was actually asked about this in the press conference. And you know, I actually watched the entire thing. Those lawsuits had nothing to do with what Giuliani and his team are working on. In fact, he agreed they probably should have been thrown out.
The fact is we have very, very few lawsuits. The lawsuits you're talking about have been brought by private individuals and groups. Most of them were dismissed for lack of standing, probably correctly, because they were brought before the election took place. The election is now over. The only lawsuit we have withdrawn is the one where we got the relief that we wanted, and that's the one in Michigan.
Now, a couple days after the press conference, a federal judge did dismiss a Trump campaign lawsuit in Pennsylvania. The judge dismissed the case not because of the evidence, but because he said that the plaintiffs did not have the legal standing to bring the case. The Trump campaign is appealing the decision. Okay, so maybe the Trump campaign hasn't lost dozens of election cases. But does that really matter when the Department of Homeland Security called the election the most secure in American history? 100% true. They did say that. But that doesn't mean what they said was true. That Homeland Security statement was actually written by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the CISA. And that statement was written in part by CISA's Election Infrastructure Sector Coordinating Council. And guess who sits on that council? Dominion Voting Systems, Election Systems and Software, and Smartmatic. Those are voting machine companies the Giuliani team is accusing of playing a huge role in rigging the election. There are many known problems with these voting machines, which I'll get to after the break. Welcome back. One of the things Giuliani's team is questioning is whether the voting machines used in this election counted votes accurately or whether it's one of the places where there was fraud. Of course, the media will tell you that those machines are totally safe and secure, unless you go back to 2016 when media were suggesting that Hillary Clinton might challenge election results in 3 states because activists said election results in those states could have been manipulated or hacked. And back in 2018, the New York Times called voting machines a crisis of election security. If you'd like to know more about that, check out my previous episode about Dominion voting systems. Of course, none of those claims about actual security get fact-checked by CNN. Instead, CNN focuses on claims made by lawyer Sidney Powell. She says Dominion has links to the Clinton Foundation, George Soros, and the Venezuelan government. And CNN says none of this is true. Dominion has no corporate ties with Venezuela, the Clinton Foundation, or Soros. Yeah, sure. There are no official corporate ties. But that's not the claim Sidney Powell is making. Her claim is that there are links behind the scenes and that they worked in an unofficial way to rig the election. She says she'll present that evidence in court, not at a press conference. So is there any connection between Dominion, the Clinton Foundation, and George Soros? Well, yes. The CNN article even acknowledges it. It begins with the company Smartmatic. Smartmatic was founded in Florida by 2 Venezuelans and did provide election technology to the Venezuelan government. And during a 2004 recall election on Hugo Chavez, Chavez paid them millions of dollars to set up the country's voting machines. Chavez supporters awarded the $91 million contract to Smartmatic, even though their machines had never been used in an election before. The fact that Venezuela's communist dictator Chavez won re-election didn't surprise anyone, because it was widely believed the election was rigged. CNN goes on to say, in 2005, Smartmatic acquired a company called Sequoia Voting Systems. But the US government made them sell it because they were concerned about Smartmatic's ties to Venezuela. Dominion Voting Systems later bought Sequoia. Dominion has ties to the Clinton Foundation too, just not official corporate ties. Dominion did agree to donate its technology to emerging democracies as part of a program run by the Clinton Foundation in 2014. But Dominion said in its statement that it has no company ownership relationships with the foundation, which again is not a claim anyone is making. And finally, the chairman of the board of Smartmatic's parent company is also on the board of a foundation run by Soros, Open Society Foundations. So while CNN is technically correct to say Dominion has no corporate ties with Venezuela, the Clinton Foundation, or Soros, it's misleading because they're using a very specific allegation that no one is making to disprove the real claim, that Dominion and Smartmatic equipment could be compromised. Here's another claim Powell makes about Dominion.
But one of its most characteristic features is its ability to flip votes. It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden.
CNN says there is absolutely no evidence of this happening. Well, Sidney Powell says that she has evidence. Whether or not she actually does, We'll find out when she takes it to court. Although a few days after the press conference, Giuliani released a statement that Sidney Powell is not a member of the Trump legal team. Was it because, as CNN claims, that her conspiracy theories were too crazy even for Trump? Well, we don't know. Sidney Powell says that she agrees she is not part of the Trump legal team, but she is still determined to take her case to court. But besides Powell's claims, there are more claims made by Giuliani that most media ignored in their fact checks. For example, witness testimony. People have sworn under oath, under penalty of perjury, that they witnessed voter fraud.
But you can't say there's no evidence. This is what we call evidence. This is direct evidence, not circumstantial. I tried many, many cases, as did all my colleagues here. You put a witness on a witness stand, the witness is testifying to their own knowledge. This witness goes on the witness stand and she will say, I was told to adjust the date on the absentee ballots. I witnessed election workers and employees going over to the voting booths with voters in order to watch them vote and coach them for whom to vote. Completely illegal. She will testify to that. I don't know, Biden's people can cross-examine her, but you can't just throw it away. Gee, there's no evidence. Next time you say that, you'll be lying. Because there is evidence.
Now, to be perfectly clear, all of Giuliani's team's evidence may amount to nothing. But that's not up to the media. It'll be up to the courts to decide after they hear the evidence. And since the media isn't privy to that information, they have no grounds to say the claims are baseless. But that's not going to stop them. So, what's the likelihood of the courts agreeing with Giuliani that there was voter fraud? Well, it's hard to say. I guess we won't know who won the election until the real arbiters of truth make their call. I'm talking, of course, about the bookies, who are holding back payouts because they think Trump might still win. So what do you think about the press conference? Did you watch it? I'll put a link below. Let me know in the comments what you think. And remember, I always appreciate your support, whether it's leaving a like, a comment, subscribing, or contributing on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/America Uncovered to learn more. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.